How's it going, everybody? This is the Airing It Out podcast. Today we have a guest. It is Amy Stevens. She's been a friend of my mum's for about 10 years. And so during that time, Amy has seen me during the later years at my highest, and she's also seen me at my lowest as well. But throughout that, she's always been there for me. You know, despite being my mum's friend, she's always taken the time to let me know that she's there for me if I ever need me, and she's always taking the time for that private word. And how you doing? You want to go somewhere? No, he just wants to go there. Let the dog be the dog. What are we thinking? You are not helping. We're just going to roll with it. She's fantastic. We're so grateful for her coming on, and it's been lovely seeing that where Callum and Brandon have been in the midst of or just past the difficult times in their lives. It's nice seeing Amy having been through the majority of it and having come out the other side and in a place where she's able to look back on everything retrospectively and really put a cap on it all. So ever so grateful to have her on, and I hope you enjoy the episode. How are you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, another good week. All positive. The sun's out. That's a positive. I think the weather makes a big difference. We're all feeling a bit low with all the gloominess.
Yeah.
But no, life is good.
It's a difficult couple of months. It's good that you got that positive outset.
Yeah, well, you've got to take it wherever it comes from.
So we're just going to ask a few questions to get to know Amy, to help yourselves get to know Amy a little bit more. So why don't you start by telling me a little bit about what your childhood was like?
Childhood. Well, I was born in Essex. Essex girl. And my parents, I have a brother who is a few years younger than me. So when we were 6 and 2, they moved to Dunhurst St Mary in North Dorset to supposedly idyllic village life.
Supposedly.
Yeah. And it was great. You know, they did a really good thing. They took us out of that urban environment, brought us to something really idyllic, but very rundown property.
Oh, really?
So effectively we spent 4 to 5 years living on a building site. So our climbing frames were scaffolding towers. Our go-karts were made of broken up bits of wood from the house and so on and so forth. So yeah, we had cows going past the house every day, and It was lovely. We played in the woods, we rode our bikes, we were very open. But also because of that, we had no rules. So we had no boundaries as children. Yeah. And I don't think my parents ever regret that, but you need boundaries.
You're a bit feral.
This is when things go, this is when things get a bit wild. So yeah, it was a nice upbringing. School was always good. And not massive amounts of friends. Don't do well in groups.
Quite independent.
Yeah, never been one of the girls. So yeah, didn't really join sports clubs or groups, things like that. But yeah, enjoyed school academically. I like learning. So yeah, stayed to my A-levels at Shaftesbury. And then what do you do? You do your A-levels and then what? And it was sort of the Blair government time when everybody was off to university, and I didn't want to do that. However, finding a job in Dorset, as we all know, still continues to be tricky to find a career job. Yeah. You know, that big role or that apprenticeship or something. It's hard. There's not much industry around. So, yeah, did some work for a couple of years, travelled, ended up at uni.
Okay. So you piqued my interest there when you said about boundaries. Are you able to elaborate on that a little bit more? Like, in retrospect, what are those kind of boundaries where you think, yeah, could have done with that there?
Yeah, I think there was a slight, maybe what culminated in a lack of respect for our parents, which was right. Which is maybe because we just kind of came and went as we did. If we wanted a friend over, we kind of assumed that was okay. If we weren't going to come home because we were staying out, that was okay. But I think it's partly as a result of my parents having both different but very strict upbringings themselves. So they did the absolute opposite as opposed to potentially giving us a little bit, those boundaries.
I think it's that I think it was, yeah, so a person gets raised one way, and then the lessons that they learn from that upbringing, they then impart upon their children,
Yeah.
or they kind of raise them in that way. So where your parents had such a strict one, they had a bit more of a hands-off approach.
Absolutely.
And correct me if I'm wrong, it seems as though that hands-off approach meant that you could act in such a way that you did,
Yeah.
where you kind of found yourself throughout it, but there were things that you did where you were a bit like, "Ee."
Yeah, I think that freedom is great, but you also need to know in life how far to take that freedom.
Yeah.
And I think I always also had with those lack of boundaries that underlying self-proclaimed pressure to achieve, because our parents had given up their life in Essex, so to speak, everything they knew, good jobs, they did have good jobs there. My mum was a social worker, my father worked, he was an engineer, so they did have good jobs, but they decided to give up here, and so you wanted to do really well, but didn't always know quite where the boundaries were to make that happen. So we became quite self-sufficient in our education and everything else. And ultimately, it's made us quite rounded people. I mean, me and my brother both are, as you know, quite independent, and we do what we want, as we want, when we want, which is great in a lot of ways. But it can make it challenging with relationships and life in general when you're used to having so much freedom. Yeah,
I can imagine. Were you well behaved at school?
Yeah, we both were. Me and my brother were both well behaved. We both, I think, not really diagnosed, but we're both effectively sort of dyslexic. So we both struggled with reading and writing, but we both wanted to achieve, I think. So we both worked hard. My brother's very good at sport, and I was very good at design, technology, and sort of practical things. So we're not great academics, but we're definitely both respected education as being something. My parents never went to university. Their formal education ended fairly early in their lives, and so we've wanted to take it as far as we could, I suppose, to make them proud of us, as we all want our parents to be proud of us. But
So you certainly had that respect for your parents.
In that regard, yeah, because I think that they gave up a lot to come and start again to make a better life. And I think one can say that life is different in Dorset. It has its challenges, but it's definitely safer than maybe the challenges you'd have in an urban environment.
Absolutely.
in the East End of London and South Essex.
There's much to be said for either side of it. I mean, sure, you've got cons like, I've grown up in a village, which means you don't have too much access to towns, and it's a bit more difficult, but you can't have one without the other. You can't have the other side of the coin of what a privilege actually is to live in a place like this.
Yeah, the protectionism that you have, you're not thrust into, I mean, completely different now growing up with social media and all of those pressures, but when you didn't have mobile phones and everything else, you're quite isolated in a village, but then that gave you the opportunity to be isolated if you wanted to, whereas in a town, people are knocking on the door, you're sort of expected to go to the park because you can.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're in a village, you can't. It has to be your decision to make that happen.
It suits some people more than others.
Definitely, yeah. I think we embraced it as best we could, and we were subjected to. We were the only children in the village to go to state school. Everybody else went to private school. We were subjected to people from all different backgrounds, which we probably wouldn't have had where we were living in Essex on an estate.
Okay.
So that in itself also, as you'll find out, ultimately has driven both myself and my brother in our chosen destinations, let's say, that we would never have had that. People with money, people with aristocracy, people from military backgrounds, from academic backgrounds. We've been subjected to all types of people, and that's probably the richest thing that we've had as well, the freedom and the opportunities to meet these people from different walks of life.
Yeah, it's a valuable insight, particularly when you're that young and growing up and in that sort of environment.
Yeah.
What sort of things scared you when you were young?
Scares me when I was young. Friendships.
Do you really?
Yeah, I'm not a good friend of girls. I'm not great. I wasn't into makeup. I wasn't particularly into sport. I didn't find my place. So I had a lot of anxiety around friendships. I had some very good one-to-one friendships with people.
Yeah, I get that.
But yeah, I was never part of the gang. And, you know, even now you see on Facebook some of the girl groups are still sort of all friends together, which is great and lovely. But yeah, that wasn't
I found
easiest.
that for me it was always easier to form kind of individual relationships than it was finding myself as part of a group.
Yeah, and I think I enjoyed having friendships on different levels. I had friends of different ages. I had friends from different backgrounds. Age has never been a number to me. You know, my two closest friends are sort of 10 years my senior, and that to me, it doesn't matter.
No.
And that I think has come from the upbringing of having limited friendships. In a village, there are only so many people around, so, you know, some of the people were a lot older. So, yeah, that's something that's been an influence.
You're not keeping yourself confined to a certain kind of demographic.
I think if you're sort of in a gang as well, in a group, you kind of do end up having the same mentality as that group to fit the group.
Yeah.
And I don't want that. I think my boundless lifestyle gave me that thing of not wanting to be part of a group as well as not being able to be.
Like, in order to be a part of the group, you kind of have to bend in order to conform, and you just want to be you, don't you?
Absolutely, yeah, and maybe sometimes, you know, confine yourself to certain, you know, wearing certain things or being a certain way, and no,
you be you.
Yeah, if you can. It's hard. It doesn't make the happiest of times because there's jealousy of not having that group, but actually ultimately looking back it was better, but at the time a bit sad at times.
So this will be an interesting one. You've mentioned how you didn't have boundaries so much and you were living in quite a rural area of Dorset. So my question here is, what would you have been found doing when you were younger? So if someone were to come across you doing what you were doing, what are some of the things there?
So it depends on age.
Oh,
so,
okay.
I think from about the age of 9, 10, there was a local sports club. So it was effectively a football club, sports club, but it had a social life in the evenings. So I was allowed to walk there from about the age of 10, 11 through the lanes, you know, sort of mile and a half. So we'd socially of an evening, we'd meet people there, for, again, different year group people and everything else, this funny little gang of girls and boys, mainly boys to be honest. And we'd play pool and we'd listen to the jukebox and we'd play tennis and I'd cycle a lot. It was a lot quieter in the lanes, it was a lot safer, and so we'd just go out cycling. We'd be hanging at friends' houses listening to music, playing games and that sort of thing, but it was quite there was no plan, you know, there was no
you
rules.
Just free balling it.
And sort of all just hung around. You didn't know where anybody was. If they rocked up, they rocked up. If they didn't, they didn't, because there were no phones, there were no communications. You just kind of expected, well, there'll be someone there. And if they're not, you're on your own and it's okay.
Having only ever known what a world with social media is, or at least from the age of about 12 upwards, that kind of lifestyle does seem a bit idyllic. It's not that I didn't have it before that time. You know, in and around the village, just kind of seeing who's about, knocking on doors, but it sounds quite nice.
I remember going to the payphone with 20p to phone, you know, to phone someone. You're coming out, you know, I'm on my way to the, you know, I'm across the road from the club. There's no one there yet. Are you guys coming out?
Oh,
you
bloody
know?
hell!
It was such a small period of time between no communication to by the end of university, Facebook arrived, mobile phones arrived, and that, you know, it just went. And it was a really small time from nothing to quite a massive difference to the way people communicate.
How did Facebook kind of change? Like, what sort of impact did it have on?
For me, literally, it came about pretty much the last year of my university. There was Friends Reunited before then, and then it was a great way to connect with people at uni, because obviously we'd all come from different areas of the country and then we were all going off again. So for me it was a great way, and then I also have family in Australia, so suddenly you could connect and just see what people are doing. And I think for what it was started for, which was that keeping connections with people, it was fantastic because we'd never had anything like that before. So that's the way it impacted, and it was lovely. We followed, you know, our first jobs that we all got from uni and stuff. I mean, things have obviously petered off now because it's a long time ago. But it was great.
Okay, so we've had a little chat about who you were when you were younger.
Yep.
Up until about the age of university.
Yep.
I'm sat across from Amy in the present.
Yeah.
I know who you are, and I've known you for how many years?
Well, I think I've known Mum for about 10 years, I suppose, through fundraising activities in the village, and then our friendship grew. So yes, a while.
Yeah. So why don't you catch me up on... No, this is what I wanted to say. If you were to catch me up on what's happened in between, what sort of thing would you say, and where would you start?
So from university to today, massively different. Huge transitions. Some driven by myself, some driven by external influences or external situations. Today, I'm very happy, very relaxed. I feel in control of my life, my destiny, and actually I'm probably the healthiest mentally and physically I've probably ever been.
But has it been smooth sailing getting there?
No.
No?
No!
What?
No shit,
Come
Sherlock.
on.
No, it's been I think, to all intents and purposes, for most people, it's been a fairly buoyant roller coaster. You know, major things have driven me to where I am today.
Do you think, this is just a bit of a broad question and probably one that you would ask towards the end, but if you hadn't had that turbulent kind of life happening at you, would you be as happy and content as you are?
No, I through the losses and the changes, I feel ultimately privileged.
Really?
Yeah, because I don't think, unless you've had loss or things haven't worked out the way that you sort of anticipate and plan. You know, when you're 18, right, this is going to happen and then that's going to happen. Things seemed quite well planned out. And then this and this and this. And actually, I can honestly say none of it has happened. And so, but I don't think I'd have ever been as happy as I am now if those things hadn't happened. Yeah. Because I'd have just taken everything for granted. I'd have carried on with my boundless, limitless life, just doing all the things that society expects. And I know these days it's not so much, but as a woman, society expected a certain path for you.
Yeah.
You know, back then, luckily, still education, but then education, job, home, marriage, children, you know, grandchildren for a family, career.
How did those expectations of a woman back then, like you just said, they might be different now. I wouldn't be able to have too much to compare it on, but how did that expectation kind of contribute to feeling a bit ostracised from the other girls around you?
I think that I don't know that was necessarily a thing that ostracised me. I think that there was the big change where education became and careers for women became more the norm, let's say, and everybody was going to university. It was a big push for the Labour government back then that, you know, education and further education, higher education, was really important and should be open to everybody. And so everybody started to go and get, you know, these degrees and things, and then try and use them and put them into something and have a career and make a name for yourself and maybe have purpose and some sort of meaning other than just potentially generation before. So my parents' generation and your parents would have been to become a mother and a wife and a homemaker. And that's fine. You know, there's nothing wrong with that, but things had evolved. So we're in this world that we've got to deal with and this expectation. And so, you're in that first generation almost. My mother had always worked, your mum's always worked, but it was very much then because they'd done it, it was the expectation that you would. Okay, because now it's become...
So they kind of paved the way.
You kind
of had to follow in those footsteps.
Yeah, and economics meant that also. It became the time, without getting too political, but you needed two incomes to afford a home. It was expected that you'd buy a property and, all these things that had become available to you, but life became expensive and you could travel abroad cheaply, but you needed money to do that. So it wasn't enough to have one good income anymore. Yeah. So women were forced into the workplace and therefore, or chose to. No, I'm not saying forced, but it was encouraged. And by the encouragement, it created a situation where our generation now means that you do really need two incomes to make it work.
I mean, not getting too much into politics,
No.
but the housing crisis being what it is, you can't feasibly consider getting on the property ladder, even at the lower level properties, without two incomes.
No.
And
it's very difficult. I mean, I don't think it's not a secret at all. My brother is living with my father. He's
I'm living with my parents.
You're here with your mum and dad. I almost was back home with my father at a time. I live what I'd class as quite a comfortable life now, but I have a lodger. I have somebody living with me to support my extracurricular activity, so to speak, and all the travelling and all the things I want to do with my life outside of work. So yeah, it's hard. It's bloody hard.
Yeah.
And you need money.
So just quickly, I know we touched on it earlier, but at the moment, getting an industry level job for the career that you've got out of university is pretty fucking hard.
Yeah.
I spent a long time after leaving uni, months and months, so much so that I set myself a challenge of doing everything that I possibly could to get a job in the industry, and I ended up burning myself out for it. But what was it like having left university with this kind of wave of university students? Was it any different to what it was now? Because I know a lot of people are still struggling with that kind of problem.
Yeah, I don't think for most people it was terribly different, because there was this huge wave of people and not enough jobs.
Right.
Not enough jobs that commanded the pay expectation and the going in and everything else. So there was about 32 of us on my course. We effectively all came out as product design engineers. We all, the degree was in computer aided product design. So we were at the height of the industry. It should have been quite easy to get a job. Actually it wasn't. When we left university, I was one of 3 that only went into the industry we were trained for at the time. And I secured a job before I left university. So I had about 4 weeks off just to have a summer break a little bit, because it was quite stressful the final year, and then went straight into work and stayed there for 13 years.
Oh, that's not bad going.
Yeah, so it is bad going, because I shouldn't have stayed. One of my failures. But yeah, it was good. As I say, this is, a lot of people would look at things and go, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't.
From an outside perspective. Okay, talk to me a little bit about that then.
Well, I think that just, so I went to a small family business in Poole. But, and I did that because, as you say, it was a job offer that came up before I'd left uni.
In the industry.
It was great.
Local.
Yeah, I was still living at home, and so I could travel. It was local, nice company, but I had worked within my degree. I'd worked in France for a year.
Really?
My 3rd year was a placement year, and I'd been out and worked for a company called Visteon, who are part of the Ford Motor Group. It's a big international company. I'd got on really quite well there. I'd enjoyed being part of the team, and I was offered to take a job when I left university with them. Yeah. And ironically, it was back in Essex.
Oh, right, okay.
Because Dagenham had back then anyway, a big Visteon department there. So they'd offered me a role when I finished university to go there. And because my parents, and I'm not blaming them because it was my choice, but in my head, they've removed me from Essex to have this wonderful life in Dorset. Right. Why would I then, in their face, go back there for a job, But maybe in hindsight, I should have done, and I should have gone and done a year or 2 there and then moved on. As a design engineer, as a mechanical design engineer, as an engineer, you need experience in different environment or different companies. And I took the easy option. I stayed with a small family business, and I worked hard and long hours, and I stretched myself through the business into departments and areas that were not my speciality.
Just to kind of...
Because it was a small business, you had to sort of do a bit of everything. I became the classic, master of all, jack of all trades, master of none. And I probably should have moved. It probably would have been better for the business and better for me. But you kind of stick to what you know sometimes, and that's
Absolutely.
a big
What's
lesson.
comfortable and
Big lesson in life. Not, I mean, 13 years is a long time to stay somewhere.
So you said, when you said it was the easy option, I'm encountering that a lot. I'm very much so learning, regardless of how difficult and how nonsensical it might be to your own head, that the easy option isn't really the one you ought to go for, and kind of embracing the difficult ones, even though it's difficult, unknown, scary. All of this is, probably more worthwhile. But talk to me about how you feel about that easy option, like in retrospect, that decision to kind of pick one over the other.
I think that, as you say,
what that easy option means.
Initially it was fine. It was good. It was comfortable, and sometimes taking the easy option to start with is okay, but sitting with it for a long time maybe isn't okay. And ultimately it became all too encompassing, the job, because I felt too needed there, and it wasn't the case. Ultimately, when I left, they replaced me. They're still going as a company, it's fine, but it's easy to feel wanted. I felt part of something with the easy, that thing maybe from school where I wasn't part of the team. I became an integral part of the team, and then so you sort of stick with it, even though you're unhappy with it, and you know you're not the best person for the job, and you're not doing the best possible for the company, but you stick with it, and it's not good.
Do you think that the amount that you gave to that company, the amount that you wanted to kind of stretch yourself and become an asset to that company, was motivated by wanting to feel a part of it?
Yeah, definitely part of something, feel needed, wanted, that aspiration of appreciation and everything else, and potentially at times maybe through my childhood not having no boundaries and all of that side of it, you're constantly trying to impress to get that feedback, but sometimes when the feedback's not there, you're not really sure where you are with things. So to work hard and become part of a team and needed, wanted, that was something in me, I think. Did
that help shut out the fact that you knew that this wasn't somewhere that you felt quite where you were meant to be, or you weren't being utilised?
I think that
it gave you something to move forward for, so you could ignore the kind of things that were ticking on the back of your head.
Definitely. It was something that was my big driver. This job became the big driver in my life. All of my relationships sort of fell aside. It became my biggest motivator. And actually, as much as that's lovely when it's healthy, when it's not healthy, it's a barrier to everything else. And I mean, a lot of things happened in my life before I left. Even it became a crutch. It became something that I relied on to keep me going through the difficult times. And ultimately, when I left, it was a massive relief. It was a big pressure lifted that I'd created for myself.
Yeah, of course. Before I ask you about how you left, talk to me a little bit about your balance and how you found the kind of idea of living to work and working to live in that kind of job, because you said at some point it became a crutch.
I was the sort of main breadwinner in the household, so the financial aspect of it was important.
Right.
Finding another job in the local area was on a similar salary when I had no experience of anything else than what I'd done was quite hard to fathom. And so I'd had job opportunities given to me within the industry I was in, but it was elsewhere in the country. And I think I've just become very much wanting to sort of stay in Dorset and enjoy Dorset life. I've travelled all over the UK for work and seen and experienced and lots of things that here is lovely, but it's been my massive driver, and sticking with that has probably been the downfall in my career more than anything, I would say.
Wanting to stay in Dorset. Yeah, it's I can attest to being a young person growing up in Dorset and being kind of on the verge of beginning my career or taking off or whatever it is that I feel I ought to be doing at the moment.
Yeah.
Dorset feels, and it has a reputation very much so for being somewhere where you kind of hang your hat up at the end of your career, and because a lot of people, it's such a lovely place to live.
Yeah.
But in regards to work, particularly as a young person, it has its limitations.
Very much so. I think my brother ultimately has worked for himself all his adult life, partly because of that reason. He's a personal trainer, and there were no big sports facilities, big clubs, big organisations to get involved with sporting wise. So again, he's sort of stuck at what he knows, and he's loved it. But it's very much been on his own path and his own doing, as opposed to finding something. And there's so many people, especially young people at the moment, with the job I do now. I'm involved in lots of family lives and people and young people with the charity that I work for as well, and you see it's very difficult to get opportunities, but also we're so sheltered here in a lot of ways. It seems quite scary to go off to the big cities, and even my godson, who I love dearly, went to Cornwall to university because the idea potentially of going off to Manchester was a million miles away, and even though he's doing brilliantly, it was still that idyllic, quieter life.
That's bad. I went to bloody Bournemouth.
I went to Bournemouth. You went to Bournemouth. We didn't even get away.
There was a mental health consideration in mine. I spread my wings down the road, but
it's hard, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's hard. I lived in France for a year on my own. I did do that.
That's fantastic.
I'd never moved away from home. I didn't speak the language and I loved it, and it was fantastic. But I should have held on to that and used that to then go off and do other things rather than come back and choose the easy option. Yeah. It was a shame. But
so, talk to me about this job. How did it come to its conclusion?
So it came to its conclusion when I was in a newish relationship with somebody, and they thought that I would have been capable of doing a lot more and progressing my career rather than staying in this one company. The long hours, just the time I'd been there, and it was healthy. He moved around a lot in his job. He did lots of contract work, and he saw the benefits of it. And it was the one thing in my old life, let's say, that I'd still had going on. It had been my crutch through the difficult things that had happened. It was my go-to. I ended up working 7 days a week very often. I'd be in the office on my own for the weekends, because the job was never ending. In a design role, my job title was Senior Design Engineer and Technical Sales Manager.
Wait.
So you can never bring enough sales in, and there's always stuff to design.
Okay, so
there's always new things.
End.
The job doesn't end, and
hell.
I'm not very good at knowing when to stop.
Yeah.
There are things in my life where I don't know when enough is enough.
I know a woman like that. It's called my mother.
Your mother and I obviously are very close, and on a recent trip, I was very proud that she only had to have words with me once and say, "Amy, stop." Once that happened in a whole week of us being together in Asia. So that I was quite proud of that. And very, very recently, I've realised that some of my boundaries, I've had to create new boundaries for myself. But yes, I wouldn't know when to stop. I wouldn't know when to switch off the pressure, the psychological pressure, the worry, the anxiety. We had clients all around the world, so you could get emails all times of the day, and it was very difficult. And I created it for myself. I don't blame anybody other than myself for what I did, because I didn't need to. But it's my personality is give 100%.
Yeah.
You can't give 110%. No. That really annoys me.
No, I know.
But you give 100%. You give everything.
Yeah.
Or to everything. But that's tiring, and it wanes on you.
Yeah, you can't afford to do that.
No.
If you give 100% of your energy every single day, there's no balance.
No. There was no balance.
You just burn out.
Yeah. It was interesting when my husband left. He came back a few months later to give me back the house keys, and he said, I hear you have an allotment. I said, yeah, actually, I've taken on an allotment. He said, why didn't we do that? And I said, because we didn't have the time. I have found time. And, again, that was a really poignant moment to go, how I changed so much to be able to do that. Thanks to your mum.
Yeah.
But yeah, how things had needed to be reevaluated. Life needed reevaluating.
So how did that conversation go? The one where you said, whoever it was with, this is enough. I've had enough.
So for the job?
Yeah.
Yeah. I went to the boss, who was the owner of the company, who I was in, and I just said, look, it's time. I'm going to move on. And I'd asked to have some flexi time, basically.
Yeah.
I'd asked to go flexible because I was travelling a lot, and my new partner wasn't able to drive due to a medical condition, so I was getting him to work, his stepson, plus all my travelling, and it was becoming overwhelming. It was then becoming overwhelming. So I'd been asked for some flexible time, and they'd said no because I was needed in the office.
Right.
The office wasn't as efficient when I wasn't there, it was felt, and so no, if I wasn't in by 8:30, 9 o'clock, then everybody else takes a rain check as well. So I thought, well, that's not right either.
No.
So it's time. And, they asked why I was leaving, and I just said, I need to go. I've done enough. And
You felt ready.
Yeah. I had found another job. It was a disaster.
Yeah.
Yeah. I couldn't work in a team. I couldn't work with certain characteristics of people, and I was rubbish at the job.
Yeah, okay.
I was a desk job wasn't for me.
No.
So yeah.
But yeah, it's the alternative is staying at that job, but once you come out of it, it's not to say you're going to land on your feet straight away, is it?
No, and then again, another failure was being sacked from a job. Never in my wildest dreams would I think that I would be sacked from something. I say sacked. I didn't last the probation.
Yeah.
They quite rightly brought it to my attention. I, again, knew the job wasn't right for me, but didn't know how to leave.
It doesn't sound like you're being dishonest with yourself either. You know that you weren't a part of it, but what was that like, saying that, like, internally, you know that you weren't right for it, but hearing it from an outsider being like, no, actually you're not.
It's quite gut-wrenching to hear the truth sometimes.
Yes. You're like, even if you know it yourself.
Yeah.
Fuck.
For somebody else to tell you to your face, actually, you're not good enough for us, which is the way I felt, was that particular moment was a relief.
Yeah.
But then 10 minutes later, it was, oh, okay. And also then that massive thing, well, if I can't do this, what can I do?
Yeah.
Because this should have been something I could do, and I really couldn't.
Yeah, if it means something to you, and if it's something that you've wanted or something that you feel you ought to be good at.
Yeah.
I'm terrified of the idea of someone being like, you're not cut out for this.
Yeah.
Like, you're not the right person for this.
But I think, again, upbringing, the previous job, I'd never been knocked back. And it was probably my most grateful, biggest lesson.
Yeah.
Actually, I mean, you're not all that you maybe think you are. And actually, you do need to sit back and really take note of what your strengths and weaknesses are. And that should then direct you going forwards as to what you choose to do now, because maybe the way you've been thinking and the way you've been operating, maybe it's not the best way.
So how did that change the way that you went forward?
So I came home on a Friday and sat in my back garden and thought, right, what do I, where am I going? What do I want? My I say newish, I've been in a relationship with someone for a couple of years. That was breaking down through a few reasons. And I just thought, what do I want? And a friend, a couple of years younger than me, also that day had some pretty difficult news to absorb about her health. And it made me realise that I was really privileged. I had my health, I had my home. All I needed to do was do something day to day that gave me purpose and satisfied me.
Yeah.
So I looked for some jobs, and again, in this area, it's very difficult. So I decided to set up on my own and offer cleaning services.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with anything I'd done, but it was me. I like people. I do like people, but I don't want to be part of a team. So I like to be myself and do my own thing, but have people around me. And that worked.
So it looks as though you took that time, you evaluated, well, you looked at who you were,
Yeah.
what's important to you,
Yeah,
and how
definitely.
you work effectively.
Yeah.
Just, are you able to tell me a little bit about how valuable that is in what you're doing looking forward?
Yeah, I think that expectation that I would have this career job and I'd be this amazing designer and I would be this and I would be that. And actually, all I am is somebody that wants to be appreciated, who wants good feedback, who wants to be part of something. Not necessarily a group and a gang, but part of something.
Yeah.
And it's so valuable to realise your own boundaries and your own limitations and what makes you tick. You know, I used to dread getting up in the morning. I never slept well. I've always been a terrible sleeper. And I never get up now and worry or have anxiety or stress, because the expectation is for me to just make someone's home lovely and better and improve other people's lives.
Yeah.
That improving other people's lives makes me feel good.
Yeah.
So ultimately improves my life. And I can do that day after day after day now, whereas before it was never enough. I felt I could never give enough.
So that's quite a contrast, having this awful, almost toxic workplace for yourself. It wasn't functioning in a healthy way.
Yeah.
But now you're in a place where you don't wake up with that anxiety, you don't wake up with stress or worry.
Yeah.
If you could just draw a line under what it was, what change happened or what you did or what decisions you made, how did you get from that place of awful workplace, waking up stressed, managing everybody else, to doing what it is that you find is important to you? How did you do that?
I think because that week that I took to just sit, and I sat with different people and I listened to my friends and my people around me saying what I was good at and what they saw brought me joy and what was good for me. So I listened to people, but I listened to myself. And prior to that, a few years previous, my mother had passed away and my husband, who I'd been with for 19 years, left and very quickly found himself in a new relationship and a completely new life, which was fantastic for him.
Right.
Really lovely, because, you know, he was in this situation with me which wasn't healthy and happy. I'd lost 3 children, not lost, but I'd had 3 miscarriages. So I knew that becoming a mother wasn't necessarily going to be something that was going to be viable for me. So I was no longer a wife. I was no longer a daughter to a mother. I was no longer ever going to be a mother myself, potentially. So this is your chance. The only thing you want to do is try and keep hold of your house. So you need to do something to generate some money, because your home is something that you have kept all this time. So as long as you make money, what is it that makes you tick?
Yeah.
And it's making other people's lives better. And so that was it. I sat and said, what's going to make the rest of my life happy? And it doesn't matter what that job is, actually. It's funny, going on dating websites and people asking you what you do, and I say, oh, I'm a cleaner. And the amount of people, unfortunately for them, who just went up, swipe, off they go, because there's a connotation.
Yeah.
And yeah, I am. I'm a cleaner, and I clean people's homes and businesses. But I chose not to put that label on myself, that it's something less than what I was doing before. I think, and in fact,
'Cause it's just as valuable to you.
it's terribly valuable, and to the people that I work for.
Yeah.
It's, you know, the amount of thanks and appreciation, and I get to give my love and support that I can't give to my mother or a husband or children. I give that love to these people that I work for, and I do feel part of people's households because I work for lovely, lovely people.
And you give them that thing which makes their household such a more pleasant place to live.
Yeah, and, you know, Christmas cards I get often say, thank you for turning our house into a home. And that's a lovely... You can't have better and be happier than feeling the joy and happiness from other people. People make people tick. Things don't. More money doesn't actually make you... If you're not happy in the first place, more money isn't going to make you happy.
Yeah.
More stuff doesn't make you happy. It's that hug and that thanks and that friendship and that kindness. Connection.
Okay, Amy, if you could just say all of that again right into that camera, just to really nail that home for the audience.
All of that?
No, you don't have to. No, you don't have to. Thank you for joining us for this week's episode. We hope that you join us for next week's episode. Please take care of yourself and enjoy the rest of your day. This has been a Common Bird production.